right.
So excited to have you at my house.
I'm excited to be here.
I do love you.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
I want to hear your definition of, the difference between culture and religion, because I find that, and I think that's where a lot of people, a lot of people's views and opinions on Muslim people get really clouded.
The sad reality often is not only do we not make a distinction between culture and faith, but also that culture has interpreted faith. There is no faith without culture as well. I mean, so how do you understand Islam without being Pakistani, Jordanian, Syrian, Lebanese, Moroccan, Saudi? There is no Islam outside of all of that. I guess simply it is important to understand Islam in its basic principles. There's no blueprint. I can't sit here and tell you Islam is X, Y, and Z. What I can tell you is that Islam is founded on undisputable principles of social justice, human rights. It was founded to recalibrate a society that was unequal. Girl infanticide was a practice. So we elevated and lifted the place and space of women. The empowerment of slaves. It was during a time where there were slaves, people bought and sold slaves. It gave rights and lifted the rights of the most vulnerable groups of sections of society, including nature and the environment, orphans, the poor. So if they are its principles, how do we justify atrocities in its name?
Yes.
Yeah? The atrocities... and another simple, basic, ridiculous example, an Anglo man abuses woman and we say this is male violence against women. A Muslim man abuses a woman, we say this is Islam. Although Islam is only 2% of the population in Australia, and yes, you'd be hard pressed to find an individual, if you said the word Muslim or Islam, that doesn't have an opinion about it. And that's because the role, I guess, of media and the role of... There's no incentive to question what we know. If I was somebody who simply just believed what I saw in the media and representations about Islam, I'd be fearing myself. I'd be beside myself.
Of course.
Like I'd be going, oh my God, they're here. And the difficulty with that conversation, often the symbol of that fear is women. Always, because they are more visible, they're the softer target. So we go Islam, hijabi, and these are subconscious associations we make. So for me, in advocating for women and in advocating, I guess, for a better world, a world that can celebrate and respect our differences, not fear them, then I take on board a perspective that is founded by an understanding of the place and space of women across the globe. It doesn't matter who they are. So when we look at cultures, I always look at that culture from a women's perspective. And is Islam going to take over the world? That is the most ridiculous proposition I've ever heard. And what is Islam? When you ask people, let me ask you, what is Islam to you? This thing that is unsettling you, making you anxious. And I mean, what is it? Is it the fact that somebody wears something on their head? Is it that they turn to a wall and pray? What is it that's really making people afraid? And when you ask people, and that's why we have Speed Date a Muslim, these events that engage back our capacity to be human, to reason, to connect back up with our own humanity, you realise that it has no basis. It's become this kind of anxious, unsettled thing that is just sort of out there.
It's like you said though, it's a massive lack of education. But it's what people have heard through the media is just what they're living by.
But then why
have any other and they're not going to seek other information.
No. And I understand that because we're bombarded with so much information. There's no incentive for you to go,
you're right.
Oh, I want to go and find out if this is in fact really true. Why would you? Because you're constantly going, oh my God, I've got to feed the kids, I've got to go to school, I've got to pay my mortgage. Why would you? And so I think I'm founded in everything we do on this idea that human beings are decent and in particular Australian human beings. And if you offer up those occasions for us to express our decency, we almost always do it without fail. Especially in Australia, we kind of take the piss a little bit out of the newly arrived. It's in jest, we mean well, and I do believe that Australians in particular, because I grew up here and I know this to be true, that we are generous. We're a generous people, that we gave per capita to the tsunami more than anyone else in the world, that we have this tendency to go for the underdog, we support the underdog. So, you know, the newly arrived, the Italians, the Greeks, the Vietnamese, we tend to, you know, initially just kind of rough them up a little bit until they settle in. Where it's different when it comes to Islam, though, and where it's actually, in all seriousness, I think a more dangerous phenomenon, is that Muslims are not newly arrived, and secondly, that this is a global phenomenon. It's not unique and specific to Australia. It's a phenomenon that is global around ill-informed conversations about Islam.
Yeah.
And I think these conversations are necessary and they should be had, and people shouldn't shy away from them. Conversations around ISIS, what it means, who are they, what it means for Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And in fact, I will tell you, ISIS would sooner kill me than touch you. The reality is...
Why do you say that?
Well, because I undermine everything they stand for. I'm somebody who embodies a message of Islam that denounces their behaviour as monstrous male behaviour and so far removed from anything to do with the faith. Yeah. So... And this is where I think if you re-engage a people's capacity to understand, like for me, ISIS or Hitler, they're part of the same conversation. That was a monstrous expression of human beings' behaviour when they dealt with conflict and in conflict situations. And men have done this throughout history. Let's not make this about Islam, because it's not. Yeah. And the minute you do, you give it legitimacy. You give it legitimacy of almost 1.8 billion people. No, it is so far removed from anything we identify with.
And when you talk about it like this, though,
it's
just insane.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yet, why isn't there the willingness to talk about it like this? Yeah. And then why isn't there the willingness to understand the role and place of women who are choosing to identify as Muslim in a Western world? And I think that's the other dimension to the conversation. What are there differences? Is there a clash between Islam and the West? How does Islam fit with democracy? Well, to me, it's a natural partner. There is no clash. There is no... there are differences, absolutely. And those differences are simply, for example, and I often refer to them in Speed Data Muslim, that when a society is very much founded on, and the Western world seems to be, founded on the ego, temptation, and our expression of freedom is almost always about, if I'm angry, I should be able to vent. If I'm hungry, I should be able to eat. If I'm thirsty, I should be able to, if I feel the need to expose myself, that the measure of our freedoms in the Western world is almost always around stimulating our ego and taking it to its ultimate expression. And this is how we deem a society to be free. This is how we measure its freedom. Can I say what I want when I want? Can I behave the way I want? Can I walk butt naked? Absolutely. Now, as Muslims, again, I'm just going back to the foundational principles, not even the detail of who wears what and how. Yeah. As Muslims, we have exactly the same temptations, exactly the same ego. Our quest, however, is not to express it, but rather to discipline it.
Right.
So that I'm hungry, I will try and do Ramadan without eating. Right. I'm angry. So we have things that offer you training. And Ramadan is one of those months that trains your ego not to be expressed fully. Right. That is what Ramadan's supposed to be about. So I'm angry in Ramadan, I just have to kind of grin and bear it. And its benefits are cumulative over the month. Very few people know this. Very few Muslims know this.
Right.
Yes. So that is the only difference. It's not to say...
So is Ramadan all about taming the ego?
Absolutely. All about refraining from the immediacy of gratification.
Right.
Hunger, thirst, anger, that's exactly what it's about. And the quest is that, I think, when you withdraw from one's ego is probably the most dangerous. I mean, look at Trump and Putin. If you can learn to harness and discipline the ego, then one is better able to be wise and engage a wisdom and a sense of compassion. Yeah. When you're more humbled, you don't get what you want all the time, then you're more likely to identify with somebody else and have compassion.
Right.
So that's the idea. How many people know this? How many Muslim societies advocate this? Not many. And I'm somebody who, again, I'll be controversial. I don't believe there's a country that calls itself Islamic or Muslim that is acting in accordance with Islamic principles.
Right.
That hasn't departed from those principles, and as a consequence not only subjugates women and by extension condones violating women and controlling women, subjugates the poor, exploits, and all those principles are anti-Islamic. So before we look elsewhere, let's look inward.
You're data Muslim.
Speed data
Muslim,
yes.
which is because
sorry,
Muslims,
we're getting too serious now.
No.
Oh my God. Yes.
Which, you know, you do like to, and a big way that you do connect is keeping shit real and putting humour in it, because Muslims don't date.
Yeah.
They don't speed date.
And they do have a sense of humour occasionally.
Do you? Oh my God.
I just told you we're made of the same stuff. No.
Shut up.
I know. So.
I want to know, because you have beautiful women who come and sit down and answer questions, and you say, ask anything. Don't be polite here, be open.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be polite.
Yeah.
What are some of the, and do you make it a thing that every one that is there answering the questions is a female?
My quest is to offer up a platform, and this is where it's unique because it is founded by the plurality of voices of Muslim women, where we find our empowerment inside Islam, and at the same time we interrogate the dirty laundry that is male oppression of Muslim women. Yeah, so we speak out against that. All the while we say Islamophobia as a phenomenon, we don't need to be rescued from our Islam. In fact, what we need you to do is reach across and hear us. And these are engagements that bring people together that can have that understanding. I don't, look at me. Do I look like I need rescuing from Islam in order to be empowered and liberated? And more, I'm hoping that these spaces become mainstream inside Muslim households and families and communities, where women define their own understanding and their own empowerment inside Islamic systems of belief, if that's what they choose.
Yeah. Right, yeah. What are a couple of them, or give us like one or two of the main questions that are asked without fail at
Do you wear it in your shower?
Speed dating? What was that?
Do you wear your hijab in your shower?
Is that really one of them?
No, they are almost always centred around the hijab, and interestingly that the hijab is not seen as an expression of their faith. It's seen as an expression or a tool of our oppression. And I think flipping that around in a conversation almost always at every speed date comes up. And it comes up in different ways. So, you know, there was a guy who said, quite frankly, I don't care for your jargon around the hijabi, whatever you want to call it. I don't find it sexy.
Oh.
And I went, okay. Do you want to know what I find sexy? And then, should we have laws based on what I find sexy?
Yeah.
Like, maybe balding men is not what I deem sexy and therefore should be illegal. What are you saying? Yeah. So when you question and invite the conversation, but respectfully interrogate it, almost always people will accept even where you disagree, and we may disagree. If we can afford dignity and respect to one another, then that is what we hope to achieve at the end of each session. So conversations around, well, what about answering the door? Like, do you have to is it weird for you to answer? No, it's like you being naked and say, hang on a moment, I'll put some clothes,
Yeah, of course.
So stuff like that, people will ask things almost always around the hijab. Who do you wear it around? Why do you wear it? who made you wear it? Are you about to get married? Assumptions that are so almost at times, I mean, they're funny.
Yeah.
That the idea that a woman is choosing to wear it
Yes.
is so foreign. And
Because I think that is a huge, people go, oh, her husband makes her wear that, or,
or father,
she has
or
to wear
brother,
that.
or,
Yes.
yeah. And look, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. What I'm saying is we're in Australia. Yeah, I'd be somebody who advocates banning it in banning any prescribed requirement, like Iran, Saudi. There are countries that force women to wear it, whereas I think it should be an expression of your faith. If you want to wear it, you wear it, and it is. If you're coming back to understandings of Islam and understandings of Islam in 2018, then they should be about the basic principles and foundations of Islam. And women wear it to choose visibility, to choose to identify as Muslims, as an expression of their faith, not because they're being oppressed or subjugated or violated in any way. So, and that is happening more and more. I think a lot of, when you look in Australia in particular, a lot of the people that are changing the conversation around Islam are women.
Yeah.
Almost always women.
Well, I think it's got to be though, because everyone's assuming they are
Yes.
oppressed because
That's right.
I think it has to be coming from there.
True.
Because I love that you are a proud feminist Muslim, and a lot of people are like, those two words don't go together, and that drives you insane.
Yes, and I did just come back from London, and that conversation also, it seems almost like it's such an intellectual leap to try and understand that you can choose to be a Muslim and unapologetically a feminist, and equally unapologetically advocating social justice, human rights in equal measure. It's not just Islamic rights, it's not just women's rights, but Indigenous people's rights. I mean, if you understood Islam in a real way, then these are an expression of your faith. You're compelled to advocate for those more vulnerable, for the environment who has no advocate. All these things, because it is part of an expression of a world and a vision of a world that is fair, that is just, that is... which affords roles and responsibilities to your privilege. Yeah. So it doesn't say we're all equal, because we're not. But where we are not equal, you have a responsibility to those less fortunate.
Right, yeah.
And in that way, that is an expression of your faith. Yet Muslim men seem to forget that.
Right.
Just saying. Yeah. As do Anglo men. No, all men seem to forget.
Not all.
Not all. Yeah. Social change to me is happening, and is being led by men and by women and a few good men that are standing solid behind women that are calling out the nonsense. Yeah. And that is where the hope is heading.
Do you find, because you were such a strong voice and a leader in your community, to go, you know what, this is not on, do you find that you get a lot of backlash? Not backlash per se, because I think, again, everything I say is founded in the principles of Islam. Yeah. So you'd be hard pressed for people to come and challenge you on the accuracy of the message. So the backlash is often around, wow, Hana, but baby steps. So it's trying to appease and placate your message. Wait until we're ready to give women rights. Wait until, and we're enduring all this other Islamophobia, hostility. Yes, we are. But also there is an Islamic principle, again, I go back to Islamic principles, that says you need to tell the truth, even where it implicates you. Truth needs to be transparent, and only then can we reconcile and move forward. And so if you're not ready, mate, and you want baby steps, maybe you need to go to therapy and deal with that. The reality is the starting point has to be with what is right, not what is popular, not what is where there's opportunity. And if you offer that, almost always they tend to come along eventually. So we do cop a little bit of challenging, I guess, to
to the position we're promoting, but I'm not saying anything that is necessarily at odds with even any version of human rights, democracy, social justice, equality, and they're all consistent with that conversation. And if that's upsetting you or you find that difficult, then maybe you need to look at yourself and not me.
Yeah. Do you find it exhausting that this is, you know, when we're thinking, who can we speak to who is going to really explain this and go, this is the change that needs to happen? You are who we think of. Do you find that does that weigh on you ever?
Look, no. I guess there are many other really amazing women, and we're mentoring a lot of young women, and I think we do lead by example, by unapologetic example. Does it weigh on me? Like I said, my normal has always been, it is what it is, and how do we find better ways of being? And that's not something that I've ever found, I guess, difficult, or it's just the way it is. It's the climate we're in, and I simply find the privileges in it and how lucky we are that we're able to not only in terms of resources, offer up these resources, intellectually, rationally, offer up these conversations. How lucky are we that we can do it, and that there is an appetite for it, instead of being in an environment where people just don't want to know. So almost always when people ask, I say yes, depending on who's asking. If it's Monty, always, but somebody else. Because I think it's important. They're important platforms to continue to build on, where there's goodwill, and you begin to consolidate that goodwill.